Could changes be coming for the Miami Heat that could impact the Philadelphia 76ers after their flat out embarrassing sweep against the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round of the NBA playoffs? Could the Heat be making some major changes, including trading some of their star players like a Bam Adebayo, who had an interesting quote after that loss to Cleveland? And if you haven't been keeping up with the NBA playoffs, he got swept by the Cavs in pretty embarrassing fashion. In this easy 4 game series for Cleveland, one game won by, 21 points. A little bit closer in game two, just a 9 point win, but then just absolute blowouts in Miami, by the way, in games 3 and 4 for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And it's really been all downhill for the Miami Heat since they traded Jimmy Butler earlier this year. And just so you can kind of understand why the Heat might be thinking of going this route and blowing things up, this series loss to the Cavs, it wasn't just your common 1-8 sweep. This was one of the worst series losses we have ever seen in NBA playoff history. Miami's Game 4 loss, their largest playoff loss in franchise history, and Cleveland's largest playoff win in franchise history. The Cavs won all 4 of the games by a combined 122 points. That is the largest point differential in a 4-game sweep in NBA history. Game 4 was the most lopsided series clincher in NBA history. In the 2 games, the Heat lost at home by a combined 92 points. That is the worst home point differential by any team in 2 home playoff games ever in a playoff series. It was just, I could go on and on with all these stats of how bad Miami was in this series, but you get the idea, right? Things are not looking good with the way their roster is currently constructed after trading Jimmy Butler, and changes could be coming soon. And Bam Adebayo alluded to that after that Game 4 loss to Cleveland. Bam said there's going to be a lot of changes this summer. Just from my point of view, understanding how the guy with the silver hair works, just be prepared for that. He's alluding to their GM, their owner, in Pat Riley. So look, Bam's saying it. There's going to be changes. Could one of those changes be the Heat trading Bam Adebayo? It's certainly a possibility. So we're going to talk about it from the Sixers' perspective here in just a second. But before we do, and before I give you my thoughts, I want to hear your thoughts on the show. Should the Sixers trade for Bam Adebayo? Forget about compensation and all that. Just would you want to see Adebayo on the Sixers? Type T for trade, type P for pass. Join the conversation down in the comments section. Bam Adebayo, I love Bam Adebayo as a player. One of the best defenders we have in the entire NBA, and he's been that way for pretty much his whole career now. Very versatile and a growing offensive game, although I think at this point he's kind of plateaued a little bit with where he is as an offensive player. But look, still a 20-10 guy who can put the ball on the floor, get it in the post, make some great passes. Had a bit of a down year this season compared to previous years, but again, it was just a real disaster over there in Miami, and a playoff performer as well. You see his playoff numbers in just under 80 career playoff games, about 16-9, shooting 51% from the field. Now his plus minus currently per game in the playoffs is a minus 0.4, which you think, oh, playoff performer, that's kind of strange. But before this year, before that 4-game sweep to the Cavs, was actually plus 11.7. So that lets you know how much that swung things. So kind of take that with a grain of salt. He was a very impactful playoff performer prior to this series. And look, in his career, a 3-time All-Star, 5-time All-Defensive Player, 1-time All-Defensive First Team, 4-time All-Defensive Second Team. So pretty much always at least a top 10 defensive player in the NBA. And 4 times he's been top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year voting. Has ever won the award, and with Victor Wembanyama in the NBA now, I doubt he ever gets that award. But regardless, the point stands that he is one of the best defenders in the league, no doubt about it. And with the Heat, made 2 NBA Finals appearances and has been pretty good in his postseason career. Now, of course, when you start to talk about trading for a player like this, you got to talk about the salaries, because you got to make the money work, and you got to think, what am I paying a guy for, and what is he going to give me on the court? So Bam Adebayo in 2025-26, so next season, will be making $37 million. After that, his extension that he just signed with the Heat does kick in, and that salary will rise a bunch to 51, 55, and then nearly $60 million. So, look, you're not trading for a bargain player anymore, which you could have said Bam Adebayo has been the past few years. He's going to be making really high-end, like 1A type of money. And I don't think Bam Adebayo is a 1A type of player. I think the Miami Heat have found that out as well, which might be why they are trying to trade for him. But at the end of the day, this is just kind of what the good players in the league are making these days. Now, why would Miami want to trade a player that I'm raving about, who I think, defensively is where his calling card is, but offensively is a productive player as well, and I think would honestly be a great fit on this Sixers team? Why would they trade him? Well, after they traded Jimmy, of course, Miami was really, really bad. We've already talked about that. And Bam is only 27 years old. He's been in the league for a while. You'd think he's a little older than 27. He will be 28 by the start of next year, but had a bit of a down year this year, especially offensively. Shot under 50% from the field for the first time in his career, I believe. And look, the Heat just could be headed towards a full-on rebuild. Now, Pat Riley is not one to just tear the team down and trade everybody and go on a full-on rebuild. But with what Bam Adebayo said, that changes could be coming, I think it's a realistic possibility that they take a look at where they're at right now and finally be realistic about their situation. With Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, like, what is that team ceiling? It's probably not much higher than what we saw this year, so it might be smart while Bam is still young and it still has a lot of years left on that contract to try to get some good value for him, get some picks, and help them more easily retool their roster towards young players. Look, for me and for the Sixers, I would love Bam on this team. I think Bam Adebayo would be a perfect fit on the Sixers, whether you talk about him starting at the 5, if Joel Embiid is no longer in the picture, or even him playing with Joel Embiid, I think would be a great fit. Defensively, that's his calling card, right? He can guard truly 1 through 5, one of the best defenders we have in the league, whether he is stepping out on the perimeter or guarding in the paint. And then offensively, he's shown some flashes of potentially getting a jumper down in there. Now, we saw in the Olympics he was shooting some threes, and he flashed that jumper a little bit this year, but it hasn't quite been as consistent. But look, he's a guy you can give the ball to. He can bring the ball up the floor. He can, run your offense a little bit, and just a smart player with the ball. Now, he's not a dynamic scorer. He's not going to go out and give you 30 every single game, but a player that can play well within the flow of the offense, and I think that fits very well next to a Tyrese Maxey and potentially Joel Embiid, depending on what you might give up for a Bam Adebayo trade. So I would really like Bam Adebayo on this team. But of course, when you talk about a trade, you got to talk about what it takes to give up to get a player like Bam. So what would it take to actually trade for Adebayo? We're going to explore that here in just a second. But before we do, if you're in the market for a 76ers jersey, and maybe you're looking for a new player, maybe you want a throwback player that you don't have yet, there's no better time to get one than right now, because over on Fanatics, 76ers jerseys are on sale anywhere from 25% off to, I've seen some of these jerseys up to over 50% off. And it's only going to be for a limited time. So if you want to get a good deal on a jersey, whether that's a current player like a Tyrese Maxey, a Joel Embiid, a Jared McCann, or even a Sixers legend like an Allen Iverson, like a Julius Erving, you got to go over to Fanatics and get these jerseys now by using our special link, chatsports.com/76jerseys, and you can see just how much money you can save on some of these jerseys. This Tyrese Maxey one, I believe right now, is over 50% off. Again, you got to go to chatsports.com/76jerseys. I'll have that link down in the comment section and description of today's show. So back to Bam. What would it actually take to trade for Adebayo from the Miami Heat? Well, obviously you got to talk about from a contract perspective. First, you would have to trade one of Joel Embiid or Paul George, because Bam, while the big contract hasn't kicked in yet, he is making $37 million next year, and you're not trading Tyrese Maxey. That's off the table. So your only other two big salaries at this moment are Joel Embiid and Paul George. Now, me personally, I don't think I would want to trade Joel Embiid for Bam Adebayo if he is healthy. I think he is a better player. Now, we can talk about the health all day long. At the end of the day, I'd rather trade Paul George for Bam Adebayo, try to get out of that contract. And I really like how Bam could fit next to Joel Embiid. But Obviously, you're not trading Paul George for Bam Adebayo straight up. There's going to have to be some other things involved, and the Heat would probably want some draft picks. Now, I was talking to our host here at Chat Sports on the Heat Report, Nick Roloff, and I just asked him, like, what would it take to trade for Bam? You know, if I were to give you Paul George and you were to give us Bam Adebayo, what would you want? He said, I'd want your first round pick this year. That current top 5 pick that the Sixers do own. Now, of course, we have to wait till the lottery happens and see where that pick falls. If the Sixers don't keep the pick, then, well, it doesn't really matter. Of course, you have other picks in the future, but I want to talk about if they do keep this top 5 pick, because I think it's very, very interesting. Potential trade that we could see go down if they do keep that selection in the top 6 of the draft this year. You can get Bam Adebayo, also Haywood Highsmith as well, Sixers legend, by the way, just to fill the salaries there, because Paul George is making more than Bam. He would get Paul George, and then that first round pick this year, which, again, top 6 protected. If it's outside of that, it goes to the Thunder. And honestly, the Heat might even ask for another future protected first, or maybe that pick swap that you have with the Clippers, just because the Paul George contract is that bad. But for the purposes of this conversation, I just want to focus on the idea of trading the Sixers' first round pick this year for Bam Adebayo, because, you know, if you have to add other things, it is what it is, but it's an interesting conversation. Look, to me, if this pick does land in the top 4, you jump up to 1, 2, 3, or 4, I'm not doing it. I'm not trading a top 4 pick in this year's draft, even if you're getting a really good player like Bam Adebayo and you're getting off a salary like Paul George, because I think the top 4 players in this draft, Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey, and VJ Edgecombe, are just that good that I'd honestly rather have them at a young age on a low salary than take on a player like Bam, who, again, I really, really like, and he's still only 27 years old, but that salary is really going to expand over the next few years. Now, if the pick does land at number 5 overall or number 6 overall, I think I might do it, because I do see a drop-off after those top 4 prospects. There's not really so much of a sure thing to me after those first 4. And even some of those first 4, like Ace Bailey, aren't sure things, but they at least have very, very high ceilings. If you're at 5 or 6, like, you know, you have a Trey Johnson there, you have a Concanoopel, you have a Kaman Malawach, a Derek Queen, a Kasparis Yakachonis. There's a lot of good players there. But I think missing out on one of those guys in order to land a player like Bam, pair him up with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, and also get off the contract of Paul George would be worth it. And that's why I think the Heat might want an additional pick in this type of hypothetical trade. But just from the perspective of giving up that first round pick this year for a player like Bam, because we haven't really explored too much the idea of trading that pick, I think I would do it. Daryl Morey did say, like, you know, if we're on the clock, we're going to take the best available player. Otherwise, we can use the pick as a way to improve the team. And I think if it's at 5 or 6, using that as a way to get off of Paul George and get Bam Adebayo is something I would do. But let me know, would you trade this year's first round pick, assuming the Sixers keep it, of course, for Bam Adebayo? Just give me a Y for yes, an N for no in the comment section, and feel free to explain your reasoning as well and back up why you feel the way you do. Before you hop on out of here, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you've watched this far in the video, that tells me hopefully you enjoyed, or maybe you just disagreed with me so much that you had to keep hearing what I had to say because you thought it was ridiculous. Either way, the offseason is coming. The NBA lottery is on Monday, May 12th, which is coming up in just a couple weeks here. And then the draft, free agency, going to be a big offseason for the Sixers. So be sure to lock us in for your #1 home for Sixers coverage here on YouTube.